What is up, everyone? Chris Gio here, coming to you from Beyond the Veil. We have been doing some pretty awesome shows lately. We did a 6-hour show breaking down Freemasonry. Our last show was entitled Lucifer and Paradise Lost, and we got sidetracked because I love interacting with people in the chat room, and I didn't even talk about Paradise Lost at all. So I may talk about that a little bit later in the broadcast. But I got a great question, because I think we're leaving a lot of people confused. And somebody left a comment in the last video about Lucifer. And we broke down the word Lucifer. We broke down how it means light bearer. We broke down how it means morning star. We broke down how Jesus is discussed as the morning star in Revelation. And the comment was, I am so confused. How do I know what's good and what's evil? And I think that was a brilliant question because it opens up an entire dialogue. And I can completely and totally understand how people can be confused. Now, the question that I posed in the title of this video is morality. Is it subjective or objective? And the reason that I'm doing it live rather than a BTV quickie is because I would love to hear your thoughts in the chat room as well. So in my opinion, morality is subjective because morality is flawed, and morality seems to be fluid based upon the time period, based upon geographical location as well. And I'll give you a few examples here in a few minutes. However, right and wrong never changes, just like 2 plus 2 doesn't change depending on whether I'm in the United States or whether I'm in Saudi Arabia or whether I'm in the year 2022 or whether I'm in the year 2022 BCE. Right and wrong doesn't change. And I think you all would agree with that. I'm sorry, 2 plus 2 doesn't change. It always equals 4. So when it comes to right and wrong, how do we define morality in the same way that 2 plus 2 equals 4, where it's always the same whether I'm in Saudi Arabia, the United States, 2022 or 2022 BCE? And as we have evolved as a species, we have started to change our morals. We've started to define things that once were good and moral and wholesome, and we've started to redefine them as evil or as wrong. We've also been able to justify some wrongs and say, well, those wrongs are actually right, depending on circumstances and, things like that. And there's a lot of mental gymnastics that goes into the idea of morality itself, which is why, in my opinion, I would say that morality is subjective. Religious people and Christians would argue with me and say that morality is objective. And if that's the case, more power to you. I completely agree with you, because that's my whole point, is that it should be objective. It should be right and wrong should be defined all across the world, regardless of time period or geographical location. But the problem is that religious people will point to their holy book as the source of morality, whether it's the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, and whatnot. But they all say very similar things. They all define acts that we would consider in this time period evil, where back then it would be good. And another comment that I got from the recent video is, well, when you talk about the Bible, you have to consider the time period. So in Deuteronomy, it says that if a man is caught raping a virgin, which a virgin is usually a girl under 12 years old, he has to pay her father 50 pieces of silver. So back then, it was morally okay to do so. It was a different society, different time, and all that. Nowadays, that's completely and totally unacceptable. As a matter of fact, the age of consent has gone up to 18 in most places. However, you and I both know deep down in our hearts that under no circumstances is it ever okay to rape anybody, period, much less a girl under 12 years old. So we know deep down in our hearts that despite the fact that it was a different time, a different culture, deep down we know that that's not right. That is, in my opinion, some bullshit that some people who were very disturbed wrote down as it being okay. So we also have to look, in my opinion, at religion, at government, at law, at any kind of laws at all, period, and use some kind of compass to decide on whether acts are good or evil. I've defined good and evil many, many, many times before, so this may be redundant for some people. But to put it very simply, I think that every sentient being out there can agree that the preservation of life and the preservation of freedom is what every sentient being wants. And so I think that would be acts of light. I think we can just take that basic standard and we can apply it to anything and ask ourselves, is that an act of light or is that an act of darkness? Likewise, impeding upon somebody's freedom or impeding upon somebody's rights would be an act of darkness. At the very, very core of it, this is just a very basic way to look at it. This is a starting point on where we start when it comes with morals and how to live as a good person. And deep down inside of your hearts, you already know what's good and what's bad. You already know. You don't need a book to tell you. You don't need a religion to tell you. But I wonder if some out there do. You know, we've defined two different types of consciousness here on Beyond the Veil. We call them organic consciousness, which is those who came from outside of the matrix into the matrix. And then you have non-player character or non-player consciousness, which is those who were created within the matrix itself. If you go to Helena Blavatsky, she talks about those with the divine spark, those without. If you go to the Tablets of Thoth, he talks about the children of men and the children of light. You look at the Bible even has two different types of consciousness. You have children of men and men. And you also have those who from heaven came to earth. You have Anunnaki and you have humans when you look at the Sumerians. So it seems like every single culture, every single doctrine somewhere makes a distinction between two different types of consciousness. Dolores Cannon was a psychiatrist. She was a hypnotherapist and she would regress people, and she did so many regressions that people were regressing through past lives and coming back with similar stories of being regressed beyond past lives, and some having lives in different planets, some having lives here on Earth. And she came up with a term called background people, and how some people really aren't real. They're just part of the simulation that we live in, or the environment that we live in, while there are others who are organic consciousness. So perhaps if we do want to look at two different types of consciousness, maybe some types of consciousness that were here in this matrix, created here in this matrix, need some kind of guide and some kind of reference as to what is good and what is evil. But I think most people who listen to Beyond the Veil and are interested in topics like this have it written in their hearts and in their souls what is good and what is evil. So let's take a couple of examples real quick, just off the top of my head, and maybe you guys can throw me some in the chat room as well. So the first one off the top of my head is cannabis, or any type of drug use whatsoever. I mean, why limit it to cannabis? Let's just take it all the way. So you have a person sitting in their home, minding their own business, doing whatever substance it is that they're doing, or in possession of any kind of substance. And they're using that substance. It's making them high. It's doing whatever. It may even be harming them. It may be something that could potentially be killing them. And then you have all of a sudden a bunch of men that rush in with guns, and they break his or her door down, throw him to the ground, put him in handcuffs, lock him in a cage. Given that situation, who's acting in darkness and who's acting in light? Who's acting to preserve freedom and liberty? And who's acting to impede freedom? Freedom and life. And who's acting to impede upon freedom and life? And who's acting to preserve freedom and life? Or who's acting on their freedom and living their life? Well, I would say the person sitting in their home using the substance is acting upon his or her own freedom, doing whatever they want, not harming anybody in the process. But those men with guns who burst into that person's house are impeding upon that individual's freedom and that individual's life potentially, We've seen a lot of raids where government will go in, sometimes even to the wrong house, shoot up the whole family, and then say, oops. There was one story I read about where there was a no-knock raid and they threw a smoke grenade and it landed in a baby's crib. And they were going after a few cannabis plants. And they turned out to be at the neighbor's house. Yeah, that's how bad it is. So when we look at these laws that are passed, I would say that prohibition is completely and totally wrong because it impedes upon the life and freedom. And so the counter argument might be, well, what if somebody gets addicted and starts going out and robbing people because they're addicted to a substance and they got to get their fix? Well, they're robbing people. So robbery in and of itself is depriving somebody of their property. It's depriving somebody of their freedom to have their property. And so if they're depriving somebody of their property, harming somebody, assaulting somebody, murdering somebody, regardless of whether they're on a substance or not, they're still committing a crime. So that crime right there is then the act of evil. And we as a society, I think, should do something about people that harm other people or that harm other people's property. But I don't think we should be going after people that are minding their own business. If you're speeding and going 5 miles over the speed limit and you get a ticket, the argument for that is, well, you could get into an accident and potentially kill somebody or harm somebody. Potentially, yeah. But the act hasn't happened. So I would say that pulling somebody over and extorting them for money is an act of darkness. It's an act of evil because it's impeding upon that person's right and freedom. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with a police officer pulling somebody over and telling them, hey, you need to slow down. That's fine. But ticketing them, which then deprives them of their money, which then can potentially deprive them of their freedom if they don't have the money to pay that ticket, I think it's wrong. Now, if you've got somebody completely and totally out of control, you might want to pull them over, tell them to slow down, and, I don't know how to handle that situation. Maybe you guys and gals can help me, with that problem there. But if there's no victim, then there should be no crime. So I think we can define morality like that. Now, if you go to Saudi Arabia right now, you can be crucified for being a homosexual. And they're literally crucifying people in Saudi Arabia right now. For some reason, though, the morality, here in the United States, our morals seem to have changed over the last couple decades. We went from it's immoral to have same-sex marriage to same-sex marriage is a right. The act of same-sex marriage never changed. The act of two people loving each other never changed. But society somehow changed and decided that it's acceptable, where before it wasn't acceptable. However, you go to another geographical location, Saudi Arabia, and you can be literally crucified for it. Over there, it's considered moral to crucify that person, and it's considered immoral to engage in that behavior. So when you examine the situation, 2 men, 2 women being together, whether in love or in lust, regardless, who are they harming? Nobody. But to crucify them or to deny them their right to marry each other and be life partners together is, in my opinion, an act of evil. So when you start to define these things at the very simple, these simple terms, the simple way, it doesn't take any mental gymnastics. It doesn't take any explanation. It doesn't take, any kind of going above and beyond way of thinking and having to go, through this hoop and that hoop and all these different ways to get to how to justify something that looks wrong on the surface. And then all of a sudden you can make it right. And you don't have to justify it. Well, in the United States, it's a different culture, so it's okay here. In Saudi Arabia, it's a different culture, so it's not okay there, and it's okay to crucify people over there. I think anybody here would agree that crucifying anybody, period, is an act of evil. I mean, that's a horrible, horrible, horrible. It's one of the most horrible ways to die, because you don't just die just like with a bullet to the head. This is, you're crucified and you die by your shoulders breaking and giving out, and it usually takes a couple of days to do so, and then you die by drowning in your blood in the lungs, which is why when Jesus was crucified, the soldier went up and poked him with his sword to kill him quicker, so he doesn't go through that painful suffering. That was actually an act of benevolence, and a lot of people don't recognize that or think about that. But when that soldier poked him with a spear of destiny, it was to prevent his suffering and to kill him even quicker, because he was already in a situation that was outside of his hands. But the act of crucifying Jesus or anybody is an act of evil. But there is, of course, the need for society to come together and decide how to punish people that do impede upon somebody's life or impede upon somebody's freedom. But see, the problem is that we've taken these standards and we've misapplied them in so many different ways. And so we're taking innocent people. Here in the United States, we lock up, more of the population per capita than any other country. We call it land of the free, but it's really, enslavement. And most of the people are locked up for drug charges. So you might think that doing drugs is immoral, and that's perfectly fine. And you have every right to do that, but you don't have a right to tell your neighbor what to do. It's just like you have a right to do whatever you want in your bedroom as long as it's between consenting adults. And your neighbor does too. And you can have a right to your opinion, but you don't have a right to impose your will upon your neighbor. As I mentioned before, one of the trickiest and difficult things to apply this standard to is abortion. On one hand, you have the woman's right to do whatever she wants with her body. On the other hand, you have the right of that baby to live. So I'm going to leave that to you guys and gals to decide out there. However, you also have to consider the repercussions that come along with that. If you allow a government entity to come in and say, well, we're going to protect the life of that child that's in that woman's womb, and therefore that woman does not have a right to do what she wants with her body, that's also opening the door for the government to come in and say, well, we need to protect your neighbor from whatever zombie virus is out there, so we have to inject you with this for the protection of your neighbor against your will, because you are potentially harming your neighbor now, and we have to preserve their life, so we're going to force you to do this with your body, because you've already given us permission to force this young lady over here to do what, our will with her body, and taking away the right for her to choose what happens, because we're protecting that fetus. So therefore, we also have to protect your neighbor and your neighbor's children, and you have to be poked with some kind of experimental thing that could potentially have some kind of side effects. But, we won't disclose those to you unless you go and do a FOIA request, and we're going to try to hide the results for 95 years. And if you're lucky, like we got lucky, a judge might jump in and say, no, we're not going to hide this for 95 years, and then you're going to get all the data. And this is real life situations that we're seeing. But I know the question of, I don't know what's good and what's evil anymore, doesn't come from basic law, it doesn't come from basic everyday life, but rather comes from spirituality, rather comes from religion. So if you don't mind me taking a couple drags off my e-cigarette real quick, I'd like to examine a few things in the Bible. Eating of the tree of knowledge. Is that an act of evil? No, it's not harming anybody. Who's it harming? Religious people will come back and say, well, it's harming Adam and Eve. They harmed themselves. Okay, but don't people have a right to do whatever they want with their bodies, with themselves? Don't you want the right to be able to do whatever you want with your body, with yourself? And so who are they harming by eating from the tree of knowledge? They're not harming anybody. The argument to that is then they became dualistic. And in a world of dualism, night and day, I mean, that's the first thing that God did in the Bible, is he created dualism in this world. God was flying through the void and said, let there be light. Then he divided the day from the night. He created dualism right off the bat. That's the first thing that he did. What it did was create dualism within this world. And then he created more dualism by creating man and woman out of dust. And then you go and you read Genesis 2, and it says that God created Eve out of Adam's rib. So you have two creation stories there. Dualistic, once again. So in a world of dualism, do we not want to see the dualistic nature of the world, or do we want to ignore up and down and left and right and man and woman and night and day and everything else? Because how do you define one without the other? How do you define good without evil? How do you define evil without good? You can't. You just simply can't. And then it just becomes what is. And then you lose all sense of morality at that point. You can't have a moral compass if you do not understand duality. Because then you can't understand evil, because you have no balance, because you don't have anything that's good. You just have what is. And at the core of it, I think that's what religious morality is really, truly all about. It's about a being who wants to do whatever it wants with you. It's all-knowing, all-powerful, all-benevolent for some reason, yet it commits atrocities, passes down laws through ancient cultures that include slavery, murder, genocide, infanticide, taking virgins for slaves. I mean, imagine this. You're a village. You're sitting there. You're just, minding your own business. You're a mother. You've got a couple little girls. Y'all are playing. All of a sudden, this group of soldiers comes into your village. They just start killing all the men, killing all the women. They take your girls and they keep them as their spoils, as their sex slaves. Your 7 and 8-year-old daughters. And those 7 and 8-year-old daughters then are bound to the people who murdered their parents and are kept as sex slaves to the people that murdered their parents. Do you think those little girls are then going to grow up to love the people that murdered their parents? I don't think so. I don't think that would fly in the United States or in Saudi Arabia or in 2022 or 2022 BCE. Yet for some reason we're told, because it was a different time, a different culture, that was okay. And that God commanded the Israelites to go do this to their neighbors. And also all the rules of slavery that are different for Israelites. If you keep an Israelite slave, you can keep him for 7 years and then you must set him free. But if it's not an Israelite, you can keep him indefinitely. You can beat your slave as long as he or she doesn't die. If he or she dies, then that's wrong. But if he or she dies 2 or 3 days later, then it's okay. But if it's an Israelite girl and you sell your daughter as a slave to somebody else, well, then she's not allowed to be sold off after that. She's bound to that man who she's been sold to for the rest of her life. Unlike a male Israelite who has to be set free after 7 years. We've had Christians on the show before, had debates. They've said, well, that's indentured servitude. It's not slavery as it was here in the United States. But the gospel and the Bible was actually the core element for justifying slavery here in the United States. Slaves, obey your masters. All authority is ordained by God. Slaves, work for your masters when you're in their sight, just as when you're not in their sight, just as when they're in your sight, to please them and to please God. It's all slaves, obey your masters, slaves, obey your masters, slaves, obey your masters. Now, we just had a whole uprising and a whole BLM movement about slavery, about the mistreatment of a certain group of people here in the United States, and we can all recognize slavery is wrong. Now, why is it that slavery was okay back then, but it's wrong now? How did our moral compass start to shift? How can the same people who say that slavery is bad now say, well, slavery was okay back then, but slavery wasn't okay in the United States? But Britain actually was the one to first end slavery, then the United States followed 15 years later. And so we kind of ended this practice that's been going on for centuries and centuries and centuries, because we decided all of a sudden as a society, it's wrong to do this to each other. I think deep down inside, regardless of what day and age you come from, you recognize that it's not right to keep another living being, especially human, as your slave and your property. There are just those that chose to, just like there's those that choose to murder, those that choose to rape, those that choose to rob. And the biggest problem, in my opinion, is when they do this under some kind of righteous indignation, that they believe that they're righteous and doing God's will and doing God's work by committing these acts. We can all look at these charlatan preachers and ayahuasqueros as well. I mentioned this on the show yesterday too, who will take advantage of women, sometimes even children, down in South America, other parts of the world. You know, there was one guy who believed that he was a second coming, had a bunch of child brides, wound up getting arrested for it. I don't think any modern Christian right now is standing up and saying he has every right to do that. It's biblical. It's right out of the Bible. We had somebody who was in Priest River. We were living in Newport. Again, I talked about this previously. And it was less than a mile or two away from my house when I was living up in Washington, who was keeping his kids in his basement. And I talked to the hardware store owner, and the hardware store owner said, oh yeah, I knew the guy. He'd come in here. I thought he was working on some project or something like that. He was actually working on some kind of dungeon. He was keeping his children in there, and I think other people's children as well. I don't know. I don't remember the full story, but I know that it was a talk of the town, and he was forcing them to eat feces as punishment. He was raping them because it's God's will. He'd call his daughter his second wife. And we've heard this story repeated many times from these little backwoods, little cults. Now, we also see these same kind of cults spawning up in South America and other places like that. I think everybody here in the United States and in most places would look and say, that's wrong, especially taking child brides. As a matter of fact, I heard the Christians, this big uproar in 2013, 2014, about child brides in Islamic countries, so much so that they were taking photographs of what amounts to passion plays. And they were doing something called the Day of Ashira, which they were honoring the martyrs by the women would put chains on them and walk through the streets as an honor to the martyrs, and tagging them and saying child brides being led off to their husbands. These are the same people who in their own book, says that taking a child bride is okay, that you can have 4 or 5 wives, like Jacob. You can have 365 wives and concubines if you're King Solomon, the wisest man on earth. How is it that right and wrong changed? It didn't. It never has. What's changed is the morality and the subjective morality and the hoops that people would jump through to justify doing wrong to one another. So how do you define good and bad, good and evil? I think it's very simple. Anything that preserves lives and preserves freedom. But it takes, in my opinion, an act of spiritual maturity. It takes, in my opinion, development of the human consciousness, and maybe realistically that's what we're looking at, is an evolution of the human consciousness. But it takes the ability to say, I don't agree with what you're doing, but I respect your freedom to do it. I don't agree with you, whatever, smoking crack in your house. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that practice. But I understand that when I protect your freedom, that I'm also protecting my own freedom as well. So we have these ideas of Lucifer and God. And we talked about Lucifer in the last show, which is why I think there's been a lot of confusion lately. Especially when we started getting into the rituals of Freemasonry and figuring out that it's actually Yahweh worship, and figuring out who Lucifer actually is. The Lucifer's the planet Venus, and Lucifer was revered by other spiritual practices. The serpent was revered by other spiritual practices who Christianity and Judaism and Christianity and Islam came after and were trying to replace. So they were demonizing the old gods. They were demonizing all of that. They were demonizing ultimately the feminine energies. Love, compassion, empathy, so on and so forth, which is how you get paterfamilia in Rome, and you get all the women hating and women are property in the Bible. It's a reflection of consciousness. But in our hearts, we know that's wrong. We know that is. It's just, sometimes we just simply don't care. Sometimes we don't care. And we use, I'm not saying me and you, I'm not saying the BTV tribe, I'm just saying we as a human species, we use God to project our own sense of morality, our own moral compass, as warped as it may be, upon others and upon the world. And this is my problem with religion. And this is my problem with the idea of God in and of itself. I have no problem with a deity that is benevolent. But you see, here's the thing, what I've learned as a deity myself, and I'm not saying deity in the sense of God, I'm saying I've recognized my own divinity. But what I've realized is that elevating other beings is what divinity is about. Teaching other beings how to be divine, how to find their own divinity. Giving other beings the space and the freedom that they need to grow, not impeding upon them, and ultimately being humble. When you teach, you sit at eye level with your students. And you also learn from your students in the same humble way. You don't sit above them looking down. You also don't want your students to revere you and worship you. I mean, reverence, okay. Reverence is respect. I understand that. But you don't demand worship. You don't demand people kneel. You don't demand they listen to you and not use their own minds. Instead, you teach them how to use their own minds. You teach them how to critically think. You teach them how to be creators themselves. And you help them find their creator essence within themselves. That's what being divine is all about. Divinity doesn't flood the whole world. Divinity elevates the whole world. Divinity doesn't point the finger and say, that's the bad guy, that's the bad guy, that's the bad guy. Divinity sits back and leads by example of what it is to be divine, what it is to be human, and be divinity in a human form, and show humanity how to better interact with themselves by example. But if we take the example of the Judaic, Christian, Abrahamic religions, what kind of example do we get? Fear me. You're nothing without me. You need me. Without me, you're doomed. I will punish you if you don't love me. I will destroy you if you don't recognize me, if you don't give me the attention, if you don't give me the love, if you don't give me the glory. I will do all these horrible things to you. Now let's flip that around for just a moment and apply that to a relationship. If I was treating Cherie like that, you would think that I'm the most abusive son of a bitch in the world. If I was telling her, you're nothing without me. you are a horrible wretch. It's only because of me that you are where you're at right now. It's only because of me that you have what you have. You know, when I met you, you had nothing. You were living with nothing. I made you this and I made you that and this and that. And if you disobey me, I will punish you and I will beat you and I will do the most horrible things to you. I will lock you up in the bedroom. I will lock you in the cage. I will get out my whip. Well, no, that's actually getting into something that's kind of hot, but anyways, that's only in playtime. But I needed to break the ice a little bit with a little joke. But seriously though, if I had that mentality, I think anybody would look at me and say, that guy's a fucking asshole. And there'd be a lot of people who'd want to kick my fucking ass. Like seriously. Like, if you were in a grocery store and you saw me treating Cherie like that, whether you knew who I was or not, I would hope that you would step in and do something about it and tell me what a son of a bitch I am. However, when it comes to God, somehow that's okay. Somehow that's to be revered and worshipped. And it's, oh, how lucky I am that you're not doing that to me. How lucky I am that you're not abusing me. How lucky I am that you're not punishing me. How lucky I am that you're not testing me. Imagine if I was constantly testing Cherie. I'm going to test you on this and test you on that and test you on this. That's not what a divine being does. If it doesn't work human to human, if it would be considered child abuse to do to your child, and if we're children of God, why is it not considered child abuse when God does it? You Christians out there, think about that. Not that there's very many listening to the show, because I know they really hate the show. But I wanted to clear up that question of, how do you tell good from evil? A lot of people get confused with terminologies. They can get confused like with Lucifer. We talk about Lucifer. We talk about Satan. You want to hear a fun fact? I've talked about this before, but a fun fact. I'll pull it up for you so you can see it for yourself. This may be shocking to some. Let's do some comparison here. I'm actually going to take a quick break. That way I can pull up two very opposing ideologies, neither of which I agree with, but two very opposing ideologies. So, do not give opinions or advice unless you are asked. That's one tenet of this particular organization here that, again, I don't subscribe to. It's just, it's an interesting organization nonetheless, very much like Freemasonry itself. Do not give opinions or advice unless you're asked. Basically, mind your own business and don't give your opinion unless you're asked, or you're doing a radio show. I'll add that caveat there. So I'm asking you of your opinion of that. Don't tell your troubles to others unless you're sure they want to hear them. So basically, don't just dump all your problems on somebody. Those people, that's all they do is just dump their problems all over you, all that. Sometimes that's what friends are for, and friends are happy to lend an ear. But in other times, sometimes it's imposing upon consciousness. And if it's imposing upon consciousness, sorry, I'm just adjusting my side camera here. If it's imposing upon consciousness, then you don't want to impose upon them. Wouldn't that be nice if, sometimes you interacted with people and instead of them saying, oh my God, I got this going on and that going on, they don't tell you their problems unless you want to hear them. When in another's lair, show them respect, or else don't go there. So when you go to somebody's house, respect them. Show respect. Be respectful of their home. Be respectful of their property. And likewise, when somebody comes to your house, they're respectful of your house or respectful of your property. They're respectful of you. And they treat you with respect in your home. If a guest in your home annoys you, treat him cruelly and without mercy. I think that's a little harsh, but again, it's, if you're in somebody's house, show them respect. And I think it could have been worded a little bit better rather than annoys you. But how about just, disrespects you? Treat them cruelly and without mercy. I think that's a little harsh, but do not make sexual advances unless you are giving the mating signal. So don't go up to a woman, grab her butt, try to kiss her, anything like that, unless she's showing interest, that she's interested. Likewise, the other way around. Don't make sexual advances unless you're given the mating call. Do not take that which does not belong to you unless it is a burden to the other person and he cries out to be relieved of it. So don't take anything that doesn't belong to you unless somebody offers it to you and says, hey, I have too many of these here. Would you please take them off my hands? And the other person says, yeah, sure, no problem. I'd be more than happy to take them off your hands. Acknowledge the power of magic if you have employed it successfully to obtain your desires. If you deny the power of magic after having called upon it with success, you will lose all that you have obtained. So acknowledge the power of magic. It's an interesting word because magic can be anything. It could be yourself. It can be your will. It can be your energy. It could be your rituals. It can be whatever you want. Mind over matter, whatever it is. But don't deny your own power. Don't deny it, because if you do, then you're going to lose everything. If you're not true to yourself, if you are practicing magic and then proclaim to be a Christian, you're going to lose everything. So essentially, be real. Be real. Because realistically, we're all magicians, and we all create reality. And whether Christians want to believe this or not, whether Muslims want to believe this or not, when you pray, you're actually engaged in magic. You're engaged in invocation. That song that I just played is called Goddess Invocation. Jesus said, when two or more gather in my name, there I am in the midst of them. What does that mean? That's invocation. That's invoking the energy of Jesus. So acknowledge the power in magic if you have employed it successfully. Do not complain about anything to which you need not subject yourself. So don't complain about things that are outside of your control. Don't complain about things that are none of your business. Don't complain about things that aren't bothering you. Just mind your own business, live your own peaceful life, and don't complain about stuff that you're not subject, that you will not subject yourself, that you need not subject yourself, that you need not stick your nose in. Number 9, this is the big one here. This is the big one. Do not harm little children. Period. End of story. Do not harm little children. Do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or for food. So don't kill animals unless you're attacked or for food. I said that at the very beginning. Don't kill anything unless it's for food. When walking in open territory, bother no one. If somebody bothers you, ask him to stop. If he doesn't stop, destroy him. Spoken a little bit harshly, but I understand the meaning. So let's soften it up a little bit. When you're out in public, don't bother anybody. If somebody walks up to you and is messing with you, let's say you're eating dinner peacefully outside on a patio. All of a sudden, these protesters come by. They're yelling at your face. You've done nothing to them. You've said nothing to them, nothing like that. They come to your table. They pick up your wine glass. They drink out of your wine glass. They smash your dishes down. Ask them to stop. If they don't stop, destroy them or beat their ass or do whatever you need to do. Would you guys and gals agree with those tenets? I'd like to know the basic general zeitgeist in the chat. So let's go to this next one here, the 10 Commandments from the Bible. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no strange God before me. You shall not make thyself any graven thing, nor the likeness of any kind that is in heaven above, or of the earth beneath, or of those things that are in the waters under the earth. You shall not adore them, nor serve them. So that's the first commandment right there. The most important thing to this creator God, this being that is worshipped through the majority of the world by the three Abrahamic religions, the first thing that you need to know is, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no strange gods before me. You shall not make thyself any graven images of anything, nor the likeness of anything that is in heaven above or the earth beneath. Do not paint art. Do not paint anything. Do not take pictures. Do not post selfies on Facebook. Do not make images of me. Do not do any of that, even though they do, and post them all over the place with memes too. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Number 2, that's the second most important thing to this creator here. Because I think everybody out there would agree that most people haven't read the Bible, but you at least know the 10 Commandments, or you think you know the 10 Commandments. So, you shall not take the name of your Lord God in vain. Remember to keep the Sabbath day. Honor your mother and father. Okay? I have a little bit of a problem with this, if I can quote George Carlin. Honor and respect need to be earned. You don't honor your mother and father if they're pieces of shits. Blood bonds are, in my opinion, as I found throughout my life, sometimes shitty. Family are those that we choose and choose us, not those we're born to. Sometimes our worst enemies can be our fathers and mothers. Some of you had very, very, very abusive fathers and mothers. So this automatic honoring of father and mother, while sounds good on the surface, I could see how it can lead to some problems. You shall not kill. Yeah, I completely agree with that one. Don't kill. But when you read the rest of the book, kind of like there's a lot of killing in there and flooding of the whole world and all that. You shall not commit adultery. Okay. That's great. Don't commit adultery. But it's okay if you rape a young girl and buy her. Then she's your property and you're not committing adultery. So you can have as many wives as you want, as long as you've paid for them. And you shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. Don't steal. That's a good one. Unless God tells you to, go to your neighboring village, rape and pillage and kill and all that. That's all fine. If God tells you to do it, it's okay. But for the most part, thou shalt not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. But you can go into his village and go take him and kill all the women and children and all that. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods. George Carlin also did a little bit on this, and I thought it was great. He said, coveting is what the whole world is based on. Coveting is what makes the economy go. You see your neighbor with a new car, you want a new car too. You're seeing your neighbor with a vibrator that sings, "Oh, come all ye faithful." You want a vibrator that sings, "Oh, come all ye faithful" too. Coveting is like the basic way of like moving up in life. Like you see other people and you're like, hey, I like what they have. I want to be like them. Now you don't take it from them, but I think a lot of people go wrong, if I can go off on another little tangent here, because there's two types of people in this world. There's people that look up to people who have more than them and want to learn from them. And there's those who look with jealousy upon people that have more with them, as if they don't deserve it, and rather than learning from them and aspiring to be like them, are jealous and rageful against them and think that they have a right to take what they have. The first tenets that I read, the 11 tenets, are from somewhere where you would never expect them to come from. Do not harm little children. Don't kill non-human animals unless you're attacked for food. When walking outside, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask them to stop. If not, destroy them. When you're a guest in somebody's home, treat them, just show them respect, or else don't go there. Don't make sexual advances unless you're giving the mating signal. Do not take that which doesn't belong to you unless it's a burden to the other person and he cries out to be relieved of it. Acknowledge the power of magic, etc. This comes again, and I'm not promoting this practice whatsoever, because I'm all about hashtag become your own shaman. This comes directly from the Church of Satan. I'm going to let you sit on that for a minute. It comes directly from the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey. And realistically, Luciferianism, a little bit different from LaVey's Satanism, doesn't actually call, at least from what I understand, for sacrifices and for all this stuff that we've been told. There seems to be a form of Satanism out there that seems to be created by the Catholic Church that does call for blood sacrifices, that does call for stuff like that. But looking throughout all the different practices, it's hard for me to find non-Abrahamic based religions that call for human or blood sacrifices. Blood magic is like the dirtiest type of magic. It is very powerful, which is why you have a Marina Abramovic doing spirit cooking, and probably Thelema doing spirit cooking. The blood of Jesus is very powerful because it's blood magic. It's the killing of innocents. The only blood magic that I condone the practicing of is virgin blood magic, and that's menstrual blood from a virgin. So most people know the story of Ostara. As a matter of fact, I might just go ahead and just play you a video real quick, and I might change it up a little bit, because when I'm by myself, I feel like I'm lecturing. But let's check this out here. For hundreds of years, we've been told that our mother is a bloodthirsty demon, and anyone communing with her is communing with Satan. But what happens when we step beyond the veil of deception and reveal the truth behind the suppression of the divine feminine? The Richard Dawkins Foundation published a claim that Easter comes from the Anunnaki Ishtar. However, this dissolves under scrutiny. The fact is that Easter is the celebration of the spring equinox, when the days officially become longer than the nights. In 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea established that Easter was to be held on the first Sunday after the first full moon, on or after the spring equinox. The equinox is a celebration of renewed life, love, and harmony with planet Earth. But where do bunnies and eggs come into play?
Some would have you believe the Sumerian goddess Ishtar is represented by the rabbit, although her animal spirits are clearly the owl and the lion, as pictured here. To add to this misinformation, some claim that the egg symbolism is derived from her arrival in a quote-unquote egg-shaped UFO, despite the fact that, once again, there isn't a shred of evidence to support this.
The fact of the matter is that Easter doesn't actually derive from Ishtar, but rather a Germanian goddess by the name of Ostara, or, properly pronounced, Easter. The time of her celebration is Easter Monap, which literally translates to the month of Easter, and known in English as the month of April. Many believe this is where the word estrogen is derived from.
It is said that menstrual blood, also called starfire, contained a healing and magical property. Because of this, women would leave offerings of small bowls of starfire on Ostara's altar. In other words, offer a sacred blood sacrifice.
Recently, modern science has caught up with this idea and discovered that menstrual blood contains stem cells with healing properties equivalent to their embryonic counterparts. Ostara's altar is also decorated with colored eggs, oftentimes red, to symbolize starfire.
It is also said that one can write their intentions on the eggs, such as health, happiness, fertility, and love, and deliver it to Mother Earth by burying it in the ground. This is called the Ritual of Ostara.
However, one of the methods of confusion by the powers that be is the reversal of all things good into evil. For example, the swastika, a sacred symbol of life, prosperity, and unity with the divine, has been turned around into a symbol of tyranny, oppression, and death, thanks to the Nazis. Likewise, the celebration of life and renewal has also been reversed as it is now marked by the torture and execution of Jesus Christ, arguably the most perfect being to have ever walked the earth. Therefore, when the world is in a state of renewal, we're told not to celebrate life, but rather focus on the murder of innocents and dwell in the feelings of guilt and sadness associated with it.
We see the same in the winter, which marks the time when Mother Earth completes the cycle of birth and death. However, in a similar reversal, we are told it's a season to be jolly and celebrate the birth of the Savior, although it's a time to be meditative and somber. This keeps us completely out of sync with the natural energies of Mother Earth.
And there is no love greater than the love of a mother. That is why mothers have been reported to channel superhuman strength and abilities to save and protect their babies. But again, in the same reversal, the mother goddesses have been turned into demons, and stories of child sacrifices have been ascribed to them, despite the fact that there is no historical record of such.
Until the conception of modern-day religion, sex and lovemaking was seen as a beautiful gift from our Creator, deeply seated in spirituality, rather than something to be ashamed of.
The temple of many goddesses were served by temple priestesses, who would perform tantric sex with visitors as a way to commune with the divine goddess energies. In yet another reversal, these sacred women became known as temple prostitutes, and the act of sexual healing and tantric energy was deemed evil and likened to modern-day prostitution. Once again, the sacred practice of virgin blood sacrifice was also reversed. Whereas a virgin blood sacrifice was the offering of starfire from a virgin, the reversal of this practice became the ritualistic murder and bloodletting of a male virgin, or in the case of Christianity, the blood sacrifice of God's only begotten Son. This is also why modern-day religion would have you believe that Jesus Christ was an unwed virgin, and all references to his wife, Mary Magdalene, were excluded by the Council of Nicaea.
For hundreds of years, we were told that Magdalene was a whore, which is the opposite of the divine feminine energy that she represented. She was also the counterpart to the divine masculine, represented by Jesus Christ.
Now ask yourself, why has the church and the powers that be systematically aimed to confuse, distort, and demonize the sacred feminine energy? We're even meant to believe that women are the root of all evil and responsible for the fall of mankind. However, without a balance of the sacred masculine and sacred feminine, how are we to achieve wholeness and completion? And most importantly, how are we to achieve balance?
Ecclesiastes 3 tells us, there is a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to mourn and a time to dance. So why are we told when it's time to celebrate life that we're actually supposed to celebrate death? And furthermore, why have we been told that our mother is a bloodthirsty demon, a whore, and the mother of all harlots?
We'll answer these questions and more in upcoming chapters of the Divine Feminine Rising. Be sure to subscribe to our channel now for the latest updates.
In the meantime, remember this: the spring equinox is nothing to be afraid of. It's a time for love, life, and prosperity. It's never been a time to mourn or a time to celebrate death and torture. But all in all, it's a time to honor our mother.
Call her what you'd like: Mother Earth, Ostara, Gaia, Isis, Ishtar, Ninhursag, or any other name. But know this: our mother loves us with an unbreakable and unconditional love like no other. So regardless of your faith or belief system, take a moment to honor our mother.
Thanks for watching, and please share this video with someone who needs to hear the message.
So and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So that's the Divine Feminine Rising series that Sheree and I started doing way back. It was before we really let go and found our own path, and we were going more towards Gnosticism at the time, but we were still finding ourselves. But when I started to look and realize that a lot of the ayahuasca visions and teachings were actually embedded in Freemasonry, in Satanism, in Luciferianism, in places that I would never, ever, ever think to look. I started to realize that up is down and left is right, and that things have been demonized. And the biggest demonization is the sacred feminine. And that's what it really all comes down to, which again, yesterday is why we opened up the show with the Baphomet and the uterus, showing that it's demonizing the feminine. And I said yesterday that it's about consciousness, the feminine and masculine element of consciousness. It's not about raising up women. But I think I might have misspoken, because in actual fact, it is about raising women. And I didn't really consider this because I was thinking more from a consciousness perspective and not a 3D human perspective. But at the core of everything, every single person comes from a woman. So yeah, women do need to be raised, women do need to be revered, and women need to be respected far more than they are now, because they are single-handedly responsible for the entire world. Because they're responsible for raising the child. They have the closest bond. They have a bond to the child. The father, just unfortunately, will never know, no matter how close the father is, because the father doesn't carry that child in their womb. So women are of the utmost importance, both on a consciousness level when it comes to femininity and a consciousness level. And I'm not talking about sexual femininity, like, men being more feminine and all that. I'm talking about compassion, love, and empathy. But when you break it down on a physical level, yeah, women are really that much more important, but they work in perfect balance, because if we have the balance of the woman being revered, the woman being the queen, and the man being the warrior, protector, king, you have equal positioning. But not only do you have equal positioning, but you have equal physical gender roles, which are based on the structure of the body. I mean, there's some badass women out there, don't get me wrong. There's some women who will probably kick my ass, that do UFC fighting and, things like that. So I'm not taking that away at all. There's some badass women soldiers out there. However, women are, in my opinion, and maybe I'm just biased, but they're wiser. And the reason they're wiser is because they're deeper thinking. Now, they do have a tendency to be too emotionally thinking, and that's where the balance of the masculine comes in, because you balance it with a logical. While men, as in gender, have a tendency to be too logical thinking and need more of the feminine way of thinking and consciousness to be more compassionate, because as balanced as I like to think that I am, I've had instances where I've had a bad day. I'm driving down the street, somebody pisses me off, cuts me off, then flips me off. I get out of my car, I go up to him and try to start a fight. I mean, this just happened 4 months ago. So I even have my days when I'm not thinking compassionately and I'm just in my human avatar as a man, and I'm pissed off, and, I've got testosterone running through me, and I'm like, oh, fuck this motherfucker, So nobody is infallible, don't get me wrong. But women really play a very, very, very important role in this reality. And women have been systematically demonized. And I think the most powerful role for a woman is raising a child. Now, women are great CEOs. Women are great business owners. Women are great teachers. They're great spiritual leaders. But think about how the greatness of raising the next generation is, So while I fully support any woman that wants to go out there and be the best career woman in the world, the best teacher, the best leader, the best all of that, I have equal, if not more, respect for the women that take on the most difficult tasks and the ones that are very underappreciated and somehow have been twisted around in society to be looked down upon. The women that stay home and raise the children. My mother was one of those that stayed home and raised the children, and she taught me what ISIS is. She was ISIS personified. I mean, I think that's why I have so much respect. She taught me. She taught me about the respect. My grandfather taught me about the respect, how to be a gentleman. My grandfather taught me chivalry. And I have friends here who are liberals in Vegas, down at the goth club, and I treat the women like ladies. And some of the feminists are like, whoa, 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 why are you opening the door? I had to explain to one of them, it's out of respect, it's chivalry. It doesn't mean that I'm giving you permission to walk in. It means that I'm holding the door open for you out of respect for you. And she said, okay, well, when you put it like that, I appreciate it. Thank you. And then I would take my personal trainer out sometimes, and she was a lesbian, and I would treat her like a lady, and she would blush, because I think deep down inside every woman wants to be treated like a lady. I have a friend from when we grew up, and I had to go away for a year, and I was in a really bad place for an entire year. And she was best friends with my girlfriend. And during that time when I was out of the country, my girlfriend wound up, she didn't officially break up with me, but she wound up hooking up with somebody else. And they were best friends. And then there was some kind of split between them. So when I came back home, this young lady was there, and she pulled me to the side, and we'd been friends for years, but never romantically interested. And she pulled me to the side, and she made love to me that night after I hadn't had a woman's touch for an entire year. And I'll never forget that. And it was the most beautiful experience that I had up to that point in my life. And she nurtured me back to myself. And then she actually wound up becoming a lesbian. She became a butch lesbian and hooked up with girls, but she always had a preference for girls, but there was just something about me that she really liked. At the risk of going into Cherie's sexuality too much, she is more on the girl side than she is the guy side, but there's something about me that girls who prefer girls kind of like, I think it's the gentleness. I think a lot of men have lost that chivalrous and are a little bit too rough and have lost that. And this girl just wrote me just the other day, and she's all butched out, and she's like, Chris, I just wanted to tell you, I was really in love with you back then. I never got a chance to tell you, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I've been following you on Facebook, and I'm married to a woman, but I still have deep feelings for you. And I was like, wow. I mean, this is incredible. And I told her, I really appreciate it. You don't understand. I was gone for a year, and when I came back, you were there for me. You're in my heart, and you will always be in my heart. Now, of course, I'm married to Cherie. Cherie's my twin flame, but she was so nurturing. And so, I don't know. I think it was the respect, and the gentlemanly and the chivalry that, it doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. It doesn't matter, feminism, all this stuff. I think a woman appreciates being treated like a woman. I can tell you for sure a man appreciates being treated like a man. No doubt about it. And we've lost that. I'd really like to see that come back. Let me know what you think. But, I'm not saying a woman's place is in the kitchen. I'm not saying a woman's place is to raise babies. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that that role should be much more revered and held up and not looked down upon, because that's the most difficult role. You're not paid. You work 24 hours a day, taking care of your house, taking care of your children, taking care of your husband. Your husband is then free to go and make a living, come home, and should be treating the woman with an equal amount of respect. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. And there's nothing wrong with the other way around too. I mean, if a woman, Cherie is way better at finances than I am. I'm great at coming up with ideas. I'm great at coming up with concepts. I'm great as the creator. I'm great at putting together great presentations and all that. Cherie's really, really, really savvy business-wise. once I handed over the finances to Cherie, our finances really started to improve. She started investing in stocks. She started investing in coin. She's doing way better for us than I could have ever done. I recognize that. My ego as a male didn't step in and say, no, I'm the man. I have to do this. No, I recognized you're much better at this than I am. I'm the creative talent. You're the, you have a mind for the, the finances and everything like that. So I think you mothers out there will get a kick out of this video. I came across it earlier. This was a TikTok video, and this woman was actually a reporter. So all you mamas out there that have small children at home, I think you're going to vibe with this.
Kayla Sullivan reporting live from outside my son's bedroom, where he's currently being detained until nap time is over. Now, this story does involve a minor, so I can't release specifics, but what I can confirm is my son is a 2-year-old terrorist who held me hostage at the Olive Garden earlier today. It's important to note the friends I met there do not have children and likely never will after witnessing this situation firsthand. This is an active investigation, but authorities believe the proper precautions were taken. I brought my son's favorite snacks and even risked judgment from other moms by bringing an iPad. But not even Cocomelon could have stopped this meltdown. After several cries demanding, quote, "Ketchup! Ketchup!" a Good Samaritan waitress miraculously understood it as the English word ketchup and brought him a bottle. Unfortunately, her good deed was later punished after he threw a ketchup-covered fork at her. Not all heroes wear capes, but this one should have worn an apron. These toddler outbursts are becoming increasingly common as more and more parents try out the new craze, gentle parenting, and completely suck at it. I'll keep trying. Back to you.
I found that video earlier. Oh my God, I was just cracking up. I remember throwing tantrums like that. I remember not appreciating my mother. And I don't know how this went from good and evil to appreciating the mother so much. But I think at the core of everything, that was my moral compass. That was my guide, my mother. And my grandfather was my male role model, and my mother was my female role model. And I couldn't have asked for better people. I couldn't have asked for better people to show me what both energies were. And my father too. I gotta give mad props to my father, because my father taught me everything of what's wrong with how a father can do everything wrong. I even learned, what it feels like to be abused, what it feels like to watch your mother be abused, what it feels like to have a piece of shit father, what it feels like, for all of that. So while it was a horrible experience to go through, he was my example of what not to be like, while my grandfather was the example of what to be like. Always open the door for a lady, give her your jacket if she's cold. I remember watching a YouTube video, and the girl's like, "I'm cold." And the guy's like, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." And he puts his arm around her, and he's wearing this big old hoodie. And I'm like, dude, take the hoodie off and give it to your lady. It's simple as that. It's out of respect. That's what it's about. All right, so here's another.
Hi, Kayla Sullivan here live.
Here's another one of her TikToks.
Hi, Kayla Sullivan here live from the changing table, where my son is currently resisting undress, making it difficult for me to be able to determine what's inside his diaper. Now, I can tell you, being here in person, the smell is quite unpleasant, which leads me to believe this is a number 2 situation, which can be harmful to the child if left unchecked. So I am moving very quickly here. I am able to confirm that this child is in the process of potty training, so this whole situation could have been avoided. I asked my child why he decided to move forward with a number 2, knowing full well he is supposed to alert authorities before doing so. He told me, "Rah!" So we will continue monitoring this situation and bring you the latest here and online.
How many moms out there can relate to that? Yeah, she's got the cadence down. Yeah, she was actually a an actual reporter for some local news station, so she definitely has the cadence down. And I was thinking, oh, what a brilliant thing to do. I mean, that's a brilliant TikTok channel. So yeah, I love you women out there. I love you men out there too. The real men, I respect real men, and it's nice. I'm finding more and more and more real men out there, and there's been this shaming of real men, and I'm starting to see people break it. I mean, going back to 2015, it was really bad for a little bit. It was really bad, and that fourth wave feminism came through, and a lot of people were like, all right, this is just way too much. It's way too much. And I'm seeing men be men again, and I'm seeing women be women again, and it's beautiful to watch. And I can't help but think that it was Trump that had something to do with it. I mean, when Trump got in office, it felt to me like it was okay to be a man again. Before with Obama, it was all, PC police and, all kinds of just, it was fucking with people's heads. It was giving those syntax errors, and I still stood on my own principles and my own ground and everything like that. But it seems like publicly now on a global level, it's okay to be a man again. And now we have Biden in office, and, I don't really see things moving back in the other way. I think we shifted it up and brought the balance, and we talked about the divine feminine so much that we can start talking about the divine masculine and bringing the two together and raising them both together in perfect harmony and perfect union together. So it's beautiful. I saw some people talking about some of the books of the Bible, the Council of Nicaea before. And as you know, the Council of Nicaea systematically went through to remove all references to women, demonize women for the sake of demonizing the divine feminine of consciousness and going along the lines of paterfamilia. One of the books that they got rid of was the Gospel of Saint Mary. And this is the thing, like, if they hadn't done all this shit, I might be up here speaking about Christianity. I might be up here, speaking highly of it. And it's not Christianity that I have a problem with, and it's not Christians either. It's the way that it's imposed upon the world and the way that it's destroyed consciousness and brought us to a point of imbalance. But I am a believer in taking wisdom from wherever I find wisdom. And I think that's been really the moral of the last handful of shows that we've done is don't be afraid to take wisdom out of different places, no matter where it comes from. I found wisdom in the Satanic Bible. I found wisdom in the Bible, in the Holy Bible. I found wisdom in the Quran. I found wisdom in the teachings of Freemasonry, especially the third degree obligation. I will not raise my hand against another brother. I will look after, I will always have a hand ready for a fallen brother. I will remember what it's like to be destitute. And when I see a brother destitute, I will help him as much as I can. I will take care of the widows and the children of my brothers. I will not have carnal relations with the wives or daughters or sisters of my brothers. That's the third degree Masonic ritual. I don't have to be a Mason to apply those principles. I don't have to be a Satanist to apply the principles of do not harm children, don't annoy people, don't tell people your problems unless they want to hear it, things like that. I don't have to be a Buddhist to practice meditation and be Zen. But I think the point of all of these shows has been don't be afraid to look at anything and take the little bits of wisdom that you find, because you will be surprised where you find wisdom. So since you guys and gals were talking about the Bible, the next part of this video of the Divine Feminine Rising was actually talking about the Bible. Now again, this was when we were still in that kind of Gnostic kind of phase, and so we end with Christ consciousness. we took it a step further and we realized that it's not Christ consciousness, because I hit a point of what they would refer to as Christ consciousness before. And when I hit that point, I was glowing gold. And I would walk around, and I remember this beautiful young lady. She was gorgeous. And I'm not talking about like Model S gorgeous. I'm talking about a beautiful spirit. She looked like a fairy. She looked like an angel. She looked like something like that, and it wasn't that she just had this amazing Model-esque body. It was her energy was just so amazing. And we walk into this store, Earthbound, I think it's what it's called. And Cherie wanted to buy some new clothes, and she came in with all these flowing stuff and all that. She was dressed, really cool. And Cherie started dressing like that. And we went the next day, again, back to Earthbound, and we were both just fresh out of like 2 weeks of ayahuasca experiences. And this little girl looks at her mom and says, "Mommy, is that a queen?" Looking at Cherie. And Cherie went up to her and said, No, I'm not a queen, sweetheart. I'm just like you, and you can be just like me too. It's all inside of you, and pointed to her heart. And I think that little seed might have sparked in her. It was so beautiful. That's the amazing thing about children. And I love being around my niece, is that they absorb knowledge just like that. I mean, when I heard my niece just, going on and on and on about Egyptology, I was like, I have a little protege here. Oh man, it's such a great feeling. And I'm sure that you guys and gals can relate to that, when you have this little conscious being and you tell them something and they absorb it and they feel it. They really feel it. They're not just repeating it because their teacher told them to, but they're feeling it. And you should see it. She calls me up randomly and she'll say, "Look, Uncle Chris." She actually calls me Uncle Taki, because in Greek you add taki or aki at the end of names when you're a little kid. So my name was Christaki, and it just stuck. Like my friends from fucking high school, because my parents used to always call me Christaki, still call me Christaki. And I'm like, dude, stop calling me that. You're not supposed to call somebody that after they're like 6 years old. And still, I'm freaking in my 40s, and my friends from back then still razz me, and they're like, "Hey, Christaki, how you doing?" But anyways, she calls me Uncle Taki. "Uncle Taki, look, here's my Anubis. He married Bastet, and they had babies." And she has a little stuffed Anubis and a little stuffed Bastet, and these are their babies. And I was like, "Wow, sweetie, you've had those for like a year now, and they look brand new." She goes, "Oh, I take very good care of them." She says, "I keep them clean. I keep them up on my dresser. I take very good care of these." And she says, "Wait a second." And she puts the phone down, and she goes and she changes her shirt, and she comes back in and she goes, "Ta-da!" And she's showing me her Egyptian shirt that I sent her. And she says, "This is my favorite shirt in the world. I really want the winged Bastet tattoo when I grow up." And I said, "Okay." I said, "When you're 18, I promise we will go together and we will get you the winged Bastet tattoo. We will do that for you." And, it's such a beautiful feeling. So, I don't agree with a lot of the information that's in here. Well, not a lot of it. Some of the information that's in here, just simply because we've evolved beyond it. But I think it would be worth, just since we're just hanging out, you guys might enjoy some of the banned books from the Bible that we went into during this time period here. And I hope this also shows that we can be pretty flexible in our gnosis. We're not bound to one thing. We don't hate, I don't hate just, religion as a whole. I find wisdom in it. What I hate is that it's used to, number one, twist morality, and number two, implement control. If we remove those factors, hey, I got no problem with it whatsoever. But we haven't been able to do that as a society. So that's ultimately where I'm coming from. For hundreds of years, we've been told that our mother is a bloodthirsty demon, and anyone communing with her is communing with Satan. But what happens when we step beyond the veil of deception and reveal the truth behind the suppression of the divine feminine? Modern religion tells us women are the root of all evil. From Genesis to Revelation, we're told the female is responsible for the fall of mankind. To fully understand why this is, we must examine the Bible and how it was compiled. Unbeknownst to many, there are literally dozens of Gospels excluded from the Bible for a variety of reasons. These Gospels include the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of the Essenes. In 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea was commissioned by Constantine to unify the ever-growing number of Christian factions and resolve disagreements surrounding the divinity of Jesus. This paved the way for the official canon, which is now known as the Bible.
Christians and non-Christians alike are beginning to have a greater understanding of the pagan origins of Christianity and the merger of traditions by Emperor Constantine. This includes changing the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday to appeal to the followers of Mithra, creating icons of Christian saints and displaying them as solar deities with the halo or sun behind them, Christianizing the celebration of the vernal equinox and merging it with the Ostara tradition of Easter, and celebrating the birth of Christ on December 25th, the winter solstice.
For more information about this, please see our video, The Ritual of Ostara, at youtube.com/Beyond the Veil.
It is important to note that paganism is not actually a religion, but rather a derogatory term made up by the Church to label any religion that is non-Christian. This includes Buddhism, Hinduism, Wicca, and under the strictest definition of the word, Judaism, which is supposedly the foundation for Christianity.
Islam is also considered a pagan religion, even though the Quran and the Bible are very similar, both deriving their foundation from Abraham and his, willingness to murder a child.
The main difference is that in Christianity, it's believed that Isaac was taken to the mountain to be sacrificed to God, while Islam believes it was his brother Ishmael. However, the Quran reveres Jesus as the highest prophet, second only to Muhammad. But we'll get more into this in later videos when we illustrate how Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Allah, and Elohim are one and the same.
Since Constantine created the state religion of Christianity, dozens of denominations have branched off, all holding the belief that theirs is correct. Today, many would say that Catholicism and Orthodoxy are not actually Christian, even though they all believe in Jesus Christ, and they all read from the same holy books. The main difference being that the Catholic version has 73 instead of 66, but they were all authorized by Constantine.
The Roman Empire upheld the law of paterfamilias, which meant that a man had absolute power over the people in his family, including his wife, children, and slaves. This meant that at a whim, he could banish, disown, or even kill any of them.
A first-century jurist, Valerius Maximus, recounts an incident of a husband beating his wife to death because she had consumed wine. Because his neighbors all agreed with this action, Paul the Apostle created the New Testament domestic code, which subjugated Christian families to the same standards as paterfamilias, thus forbidding women from having any kind of authority or power, not only in the church, but in domestic life as well. Hence the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
This ideology is well aligned with the foundation of Mosaic law. Deuteronomy 21:10 details how slave wives can be captured in battle. Exodus 21:20 includes instructions on how to beat your slave within an inch of their life because they are considered property. Exodus 21:7 authorizes a man to sell his little girls into sex slavery under the guidelines of Scripture. Deuteronomy 22:28 states that if a man is caught in the act of raping a little girl, he must pay her father 50 pieces of silver. She then becomes his wife/property.
These ideologies are repeated in the New Testament as well. 1 Corinthians 14:34 states that women are to remain silent and claim no authority. Colossians 3:22 tells all slaves to obey their earthly masters. And in case someone gets the idea that these rules may be somewhat unfair, Romans 13 states that all authority is ordained by God, and therefore you should never question any of this.
Despite the pagan influence by Constantine and the politically motivated, misogynistic agenda of the Council of Nicaea, most Christians cling to the Constantine canon as the Word of God and dismiss the Gnostic Gospels altogether, including the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of the Essenes.
Now, there is quite a bit of controversy surrounding the Gospel of the Essenes, so I would urge everyone to read the scripture for themselves and determine if the message resonates with you. However, because of the consistent pattern of feminine suppression in modern Christianity, to me it makes sense why the church would go to such lengths to suppress this very important gospel.
It is said that the Essenes were mystics and students of the ancient mystery schools. They practiced astral travel, divination, healing, and meditation. They were essentially a pagan sect of Judaism.
According to many scholars, John the Baptist was Essene and recognized Jesus as an ascended master. It is believed that Joseph and Mary were also Essene and took Jesus to Egypt and India in his early years to train him in the mystery school traditions.
The word Mary may not have been a name, but rather a title for a high priestess or free woman not bound by the laws of paterfamilias, and therefore a threat to the Holy Roman Empire. This is why there are so many mentions of Marys in the Bible, including Mary the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Mary the mother of Joses, Mary the wife of Clopas, Mary of Bethany, Mary the mother of Mark, Mary of Rome, and many more.
The Gospel of the Essenes, also known as the Gospel of Peace, shows Jesus in a very different light. Most of the text acknowledges both the Mother and the Father in heaven, as well as the earthly mother, and this is obviously contrary to the laws of paterfamilias. Jesus is quoted as saying,
"Your mother is in you, and you in her. She bore you, she gives you life. It was she who gave you your body, and one day you will give it back again. Happy are you when you come to know her and her kingdom, if you receive your mother's angels, and if you do her laws. I tell you truly, he who does these things shall never see disease, for the power of our mother is above all, and it destroys Satan and his kingdom, and has rule over all your bodies and all living things."
The words of Jesus appear to be aligned with his upbringing as an Essene, balancing both the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. He is quoted as saying, if you don't mind me pausing it here for a second, I just want to say, if this was the Jesus that they were promoting, I would be totally all for it. I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I'm totally resonating with this. Like the balance, like that was the big question. Where's the mother? Where's the mother? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You can argue that the Holy Spirit is the mother. Okay, let's argue that. But, it was the absence of the mother. And after being raised by such a wonderful mother, I was asking, where's the mother? Where's the mother? And I remember bringing this up in church, and they would just tell me, shut up, stop asking questions.
Pray every day to your heavenly Father and your earthly mother, that your soul becomes as perfect as your heavenly Father's Holy Spirit is perfect, and that your body becomes as perfect as the body of your earthly mother is perfect. For if you understand, feel, and do the commandments, then all for which you pray to your heavenly Father and your earthly mother will be given to you.
In 1923, a Hungarian professor by the name of Edmund Székely discovered the Gospel of the Essenes in the Vatican Library. Shortly after he translated the manuscripts, the Vatican quickly moved to discredit him, first by denying the existence of these documents, then 50 years later by stating that he never even had access to the archives to begin with. But the big question is, why have these documents been suppressed for so long?
The Gospel of the Essenes focuses primarily on living in harmony with our Mother Earth and balancing the sacred feminine and masculine. Needless to say, the book has been criticized as a fake, a forgery, and merely an attempt to steer Christianity towards New Age beliefs and ideologies.
For me personally, the Gospel of the Essenes speaks truth and portrays Jesus as an ascended master, one who has achieved balance between the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. So the obvious question is, why has the Church gone to such lengths to suppress the divine feminine?
And who was Mary Magdalene? Was she really a whore? Or was she the personification of the divine feminine?
We'll answer these questions and more in the next chapter of the Divine Feminine Rising.
In the meantime, please share this video with someone who needs to hear the message.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insights from... I really love this ending. Blessed are those who like, comment, and subscribe, for they will receive great wisdom. The Gospel of BTV. We were doing these videos a while back, and they were just so time-consuming. But the next video, I think it's worth playing. You know, I didn't realize it's midnight already. It's 3 a.m. on the East Coast. But I think the next video is worth playing. I just don't like the ending of it, because it goes into the Christ consciousness stuff, and we kind of ascended beyond that. But there's some good info here, so check it out. For hundreds of years, we've been told that our mother is a bloodthirsty demon, and anyone communing with her is communing with Satan. But what happens when we step beyond the veil of deception and reveal the truth behind the suppression of the divine feminine? In part 1 of this series, we detailed how the Roman Emperor Constantine commissioned the Council of Nicaea, which resulted in the official canon of the Bible. However, the suppression of the female energy is much deeper than a group of misogynistic priests and rabbis who viewed women as property and commodities.
Until the beginning of the Common Era, most civilizations understood and embraced the balance of duality, up and down, left and right, night and day, man and woman. After all, it takes two to create.
When monotheism was introduced, the underlying intention was to offset the balance of the human consciousness. When a person is unbalanced, they're far easier to control and manipulate.
We see a similar method in mind control programs, such as MKUltra, where the purpose is to split the consciousness of the individual in two. And quite frankly, when examining the last 2,000 years, it becomes obvious the human consciousness has been subjected to trauma-based mind control.
This is why, as a humanity, we've been split apart, and we're made to operate solely from the masculine energy and suppress the divine feminine. The traits of the divine masculine include logic, reason, protection, and the acquisition of material goods.
The feminine is the intuition, nurturing, healing, and emotional awareness.
When both elements of our consciousness are working in unison, we live in harmony with each other and with Mother Earth. However, when the masculine is operating solely on its own, the acquisition of material goods and survival becomes consumerism, survival of the fittest, nation building, and parasitic capitalism, to the point of destroying not only each other, but destroying our Mother Earth as well.
If the feminine energy can be wrapped up in a single word, it would be feeling. We must feel what is going on in the world. We must feel each other, and we must feel our Mother Earth. For example, in some Native American cultures, the clan mothers would decide when it was proper for the men to fight, and if disputes warranted the potential loss of life. This ensured that battles among the men were fought for the purpose of settling injustices, rather than greed or materialistic gain.
Now imagine if these principles were applied in modern civilization. Over the last 20 years, we've invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and many more countries, for the purpose of stealing resources. However, if we were operating from a place of balance with the feminine and masculine, would we still send our children to die for any purpose other than to fight invaders, threatening our sovereignty?
As part of the deintegration from the feminine, modern religion has not only rewritten history, but labeled every other belief system as paganism, which has become synonymous with Satanism. This is why there is so much confusion about the goddess energy, and most people stuck in a religious paradigm are unable to see the literal demonization of the sacred feminine right before their eyes, and many choose to stay willfully ignorant to the signs and symbols that bombard their consciousness daily.
It is important to realize the gods and goddesses of ancient times may not necessarily have been physical beings, but rather they're different elements of our own consciousness and existence. Therefore, when we invoke them collectively, we're manifesting and channeling a very powerful energy. As a matter of fact, Jesus Christ made a reference to this type of invocation in Matthew 18:20, when he said,
"For when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of you."
The church has gone out of its way to merge and then paintbrush all goddesses as Satan in order to keep us disconnected from these parts of ourselves. They have convinced us that spiritual tools like meditation, divination, astrology, and even yoga are all tools of Satan. But many of us understand the spells being cast upon the human consciousness on a daily basis. For example, in recent years, we've been told that a terrorist organization by the name of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria are lurking around every corner, waiting to attack us for our religious beliefs. The mainstream media has referred to them as ISIS. As a result, ISIS has been injected into the human consciousness as the enemy, as we repeat the magic spell: fear ISIS, fight ISIS, destroy ISIS.
In Egyptian mythology, the word Isis refers to a mother goddess, often interchangeable with Hathor. She represents love, compassion, and empathy. The names of the gods and goddesses resonate a frequency and energy. This belief is also held in Judaism and Christianity, which has resulted in large debates on the pronunciation of Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jesus, and Yeshua.
Because the name Isis resonates the energy of motherly love, compassion, and empathy, the world is unknowingly casting the spell to fear motherly love, fight compassion, and destroy empathy, when referring to the Islamic State as ISIS.
The goddess Isis is often portrayed with a crown on her head, which is symbolic of the seat of Horus. The Eye of Horus has been labeled as Satan's eye by modern religion. However, the eye is a representation of the human brain, particularly the thalamus, which is known as the seat of consciousness, next to the pineal. Therefore, when we refer to ISIS as a demon or a terrorist organization, we're energetically disconnecting ourselves from our own consciousness, and thus disconnecting ourselves from the seat of our own divinity.
A similar spell was cast during the invasion of Iraq. George W. Bush labeled the first strike as shock and awe. The term was repeated a multitude of times throughout the mainstream media and injected into the human consciousness. As we repeated the term shock and awe, we were actually invoking the Judaic goddess Shekinah, who is also known as Asherah, the estranged wife of Yahweh, according to the Kabbalah.
The Semitic root of the word Shekinah means to settle, inhabit, or dwell. Therefore, the world was invoking the energy of Shekinah in order for the West to settle, inhabit, and dwell in the Middle East. And almost 20 years later, the United States occupies the majority of the region, with Iran seemingly the final target.
Here's an interesting fact. One of the first operations in Iraq was entitled Operation Planet X. Officially, it was a mission to secure an obscure village, supposedly the hideout of mid-level Al-Qaeda members. However, 11 miles away was the Museum of Tikrit, which housed Sumerian and Babylonian artifacts. We'll focus on the esoteric and occult significance of this region in upcoming editions of Beyond the Veil. To stay up to date with our latest videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button now.
Because of the electronic global network, television, internet, and media, the human consciousness can be manipulated in ways like never before. This is why it's more important than ever to fully understand why this knowledge is forbidden and why they suppressed the sacred feminine.
And we assure you, you will not be going to hell for unlocking this gnosis.
As a matter of fact, the concept of hell was merged with Christianity from pagan traditions by Emperor Constantine. When Christians use the name hell, they are actually invoking the Nordic goddess of the underworld, also known as Hel. It was believed that her domain was a place where all souls go, regardless of whether they were righteous or not.
The underworld is a concept known by many cultures. The Greeks referred to this place as Hades. The Egyptians referred to this place as Duat, and in Judaism, this place is called Sheol. Which begs the question, if Judaism is the foundation of Christianity, and the Hebrews are God's chosen people, why don't they believe in the fundamental principles of heaven and hell? When examining the history of modern Christianity, it becomes ever more clear that the concept of hell was created as a system of control.
In the first part of this series, we spoke briefly about the Essenes, a sect of Judaism that practiced spirituality, divination, and balance between the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. In modern times, they are known as the Gnostics. The word Gnostic is derived from the Greek word gnosis, which means having knowledge of spiritual mysteries. The Gnostics are credited for various writings, including the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
According to Dr. Karen King, a Gnostic scholar, fragments of Gnostic writings have been translated, clearly showing Jesus referring to Mary Magdalene as his wife. Like the Gospel of Peace and the Revelation of the Essene, these writings have been viciously attacked by the Church and criticized as an attempt to portray Jesus as an ordinary man, rather than the Son of God. But he never claimed to be the Son of God. Instead, he claimed to be the Son of Man.
As previously outlined, one of the main goals of the Council of Nicaea was to settle disputes about the divinity of Jesus. This was heavily due to the widely held belief of the Gnostic understanding of Christ consciousness. The Essenes, aka the Gnostics, believed that through a series of activations and gnosis, all beings could achieve the same state of divinity as Jesus Christ. Rather than being a figure who is separate from us, who came to earth with special godlike powers, the ministry of Jesus was to first overthrow the religious hierarchy, then demonstrate how each one of us can achieve Christ consciousness. Remnants of this understanding can still be found in Constantine's Bible. John 14:12 states, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also, and greater works than these he will do."
Because Constantine aimed to create a state religion, ultimately aimed at controlling the Roman Empire, Jesus Christ had to be portrayed as a perfect being and a virgin sacrifice. As a result, Mary Magdalene was portrayed as a whore rather than his counterpart and the representation of the sacred feminine. After all, if the human consciousness was elevated to the point of Christ consciousness, religion, government, and the economy would all come crumbling down when we realize we're all spiritual beings connected to one another, connected to Source, and connected to our Mother Earth. And to put it bluntly, global awakening just isn't good for business.
However, in recent years, the world is stepping beyond the veil as more and more people wake up and unlock their own divinity and walk the path towards Christ consciousness. As our Mother Earth shifts into a higher dimensional frequency, millions of people are experiencing heightened intuition, abilities of manifestation, and even telepathy.
Likewise, more and more people are walking the true path of Christ, by rejecting Constantine's Christianity, as Jesus rejected the religion of the Pharisees. This includes rebalancing the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, and fully understanding the message in John 8:44.
You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and doesn't stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it.
But the real question is, who is the father of the Pharisees? Who is the devil? And who is the adversary, aka Lucifer?
We'll answer these questions and more in part 3 of this series. And in the meantime, please share this with someone that needs to hear the message.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insights from Beyond the Veil. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for the love, because when we released this, we released it in 2016, I think. And I actually was taking a little jab at Trump, because I didn't really understand who Trump was at the time. And I was still in the mindset of, presidents are selected, not elected. And I thought he was just going to be another, just one that just did, the agenda is normal. But we had a great economy. We didn't have wars. And when I realized they had to make stuff up to bash him, and all it was, was about his mean tweets, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I need to start paying attention to this guy. But this is obviously a fake tweet. And I remember when we put this out, people were like, Trump never said that. And I'm like, I know, it's a joke, okay? It's like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, Just met with the Pope, love the guy, we agree, global awakening is not good for business. It's just taking a little jab, and then, once I think what it was realistically is just the consciousness was so bombarded by war for my entire life that the relief of that just felt so good to have that lifted. But what wound up happening is in 2020, we had the worst removal of our constitutional rights that we ever had. And, I have to ask myself, did we give them up willingly because we thought, oh, it's okay, Trump is going to take care of everything? And then he turned around and he backed away. And when we did our thing at the Luxor, I hate to be redundant, but I saw Trump in a false light, and I saw him handing over everything back to the cabal. And I talked about it. I didn't want to give it energy. So I kind of changed my words, and I'm like, okay, even if that's true, I'm going to still continue to try to bring the positive timeline and move forward that way. Avoid everything that's going on right now for many different reasons. I mean, some selfish reasons, some not so selfish reasons. I mean, I'm completely honest, completely transparent. I know that there's going to be more life sales if gas is $1 or $2 a gallon. People are going to take more focus on their body, and business is going to be better. We invested in stocks. The stocks are going to do better. Coin is going to do better. The lives of everybody else out there, when their rent is lower, is going to be better. There's more disposable income out there. So it helps everybody all along the line. And when I realized this guy was doing that, I was like, man, this guy is something different. Then 2020 hit. And as I watched him handle 2020, I was expecting complete crash, prices just going through the roof and businesses crashing left and right, but he made it to where they didn't. He made it to where things were still okay. He did the rent freezes and everything like that, and the mortgage freezes, and he figured out a way to keep the economy balanced even through the pandemic. But he did have Fauci at the head of everything. He did make a comment, and he said, I love Fauci. He's a great guy. Everything he would say, I would do the opposite, and I was always right. So I could always count on him to tell me what to do, and I always did the opposite of what he told me to do. But at the same time, I think that he could have fought a little bit harder when it came down to it at the end of everything, I really feel like he should have. But maybe that would have just been too much of a power move, and that would have not brought balance. That would have brought more imbalance. And as I've said before, we have so many people now that are feeling it. I mean, I go to my Facebook and it's just nothing but gas prices just, soaring through the roof. And everybody is like, hey, this is hell. This is not building back better. This is not any of that. So you can take the most liberal person out there and they're like, hey, there's something seriously wrong here. So maybe we just needed to go through this negativity so we can realize, have a reference point and remember, hey, it was this good back then. It's this bad now. Maybe in 2024, we want to bring it back to where it is, where it's good. And we're not going to have, a group of people burning buildings down as a result. But the measures that they went through to create the chaos, Soros paying BLM to create the chaos, told me he's not one of them. They really hate him. This is not fake. He has a family name and a family reputation, and he put all that on the line in order to do everything that he did. And why would he voluntarily get up there to destroy his family's name after all of that? For what? What gain did he have? He lost a lot of his wealth by becoming president. And then banks stopped doing business with him. Companies stopped doing business with him. They tried to attack him financially. They're still trying to bring him down even to this day. And so I have to ask myself, was he part of it? The only thing that I can say, yes, he was part of it, is because everything happened while he was at the helm. But then I also have to ask myself also, how much power does the presidency have? And then you have the whole story that came out that they basically made a deal with China. General Milley told his Chinese counterpart, don't worry, if anything happens, we're gonna let you know ahead of time. They were having secret meetings, and that was perfectly fine. There was no investigation into it. There was nothing like that. There was a whole Hunter Biden thing that came out. They suppressed it all over the place, called it hacked information, even though it was obtained legally, and then turned around at the last minute and said, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we made a mistake on that. That's actually true. All that's actually true. And still to this day, they're really, really afraid that he is going to provoke a change in 2022 or 2023, I should say, on the statewide level, and then come back in 2024. So maybe it was a strategic move to step away, because if things were going to collapse, he definitely didn't want to be at the helm of it. But he can position himself to where when the collapse happens, as it's happening now, then he can come back in and come back in and fix things. But the way that I saw it, if he had 8 years to undo the New World Order agenda, we would have a really great world ahead of us. But we're going through the fire right now. I mean, here's just one example right here. Just one example. This was a video that I shot today. I was at a gas station, and I swear it was like it was like a slot machine. I was watching the gas prices going up by the second. Look at this. Like, this is no joke. Like, that's how quick the gas prices went up. 10 cents, just like that. And I was like, oh, I better get my card in quick before it goes to $5. I fill up my tank and it's $75. Like, this is no joke, My landlord, our lease expired in August, and we've been going month to month. And he said, I'm not going to raise the rent on you, but I will eventually have to do another lease. And he said, we're going to raise it by 10%. And I said, that's actually pretty generous, because rent's being raised by 40% right now. So, the only reason is because we have such a good relationship. But his property taxes went up. So I can't argue with him about it. I can't say, I want you to lose money in this. But at the same time, we're being hit left and right all over the place, Luckily, we're backed up on ILF orders, and we're trying to get ILF orders out. So, we're doing okay. But it's bad. Here's another little meme for you. You know, they won't burn down cities if gas is $10 a gallon. But I mean, it's hitting everybody hard all over the place. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's painful to watch because, you know, we as Organic Consciousness BTV tribe, a lot of us have been able to make it through okay through all of this. And yeah, it's been difficult, but we've just been lucky, you know, just things just happen. You know, we happen to invest in a coin that does really well, or, you know, something like that. The universe steps in and takes care. And I think a lot of you can share similar stories like that. You can share stories of struggle. You can also share stories of success. You can share stories of just luck that just like happens, karma coming back because you're genuinely good people out there, and you have karma built up. You have karma points that are coming back to you right now at a time when you need it. So I'm not really too worried about us. I'm not really too worried about me and Cherie. I'm not too worried about the tribe. But on a worldwide level, I feel for everybody, especially for my brothers and sisters in Australia. My brothers and sisters in Canada, they froze the bank accounts. They're kicking people out who donated to the trucker rally thing. You know, I mean, is it a coincidence that the truckers are all going to get together and do a whole trucker thing, and then all of a sudden gas goes up to $10 a gallon in California? No, I don't think so. I think it's all by design, and they're blaming Ukraine for it. Like, oh, it's Ukraine, we can't buy our oil from Russia. Well, yeah, we were self-sufficient when it came to oil in 2016 to 2020. The first thing that Biden did is undid the pipeline that made us self-sufficient. And now we're buying oil from other countries. And it's completely backwards. It's like we buy oil from OPEC, and we ask them to produce a certain amount of barrels of oil. And instead of ordering more oil to bring the price of gas down, we order less oil to make the price of gas go up, insanely up. So it's like, you know, you're locked down for 2 years, forced to wear masks. Businesses are at 25% capacity. If they're allowed to open, they go back to 50%. The mandates get removed, and then all of a sudden, boom, you've got hyperinflation, and you've got the price of gas. Like, I was going to go get tattoo removal tomorrow, and she charges me next to nothing for tattoo removal. But I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I want to pay the gas to go back there, to go and come back. I mean, it's like, you know, we're having to like really think about making decisions like this. And, you know, I feel for the world out there, and it's a rough time that we're going through right now. And we were trying to prevent this from happening, but maybe it's just necessary that it does happen. But I just want to let everybody out there know that I feel you in my heart and in my soul, and I feel what everybody's going through right now, and the sacrifices that we're having to make by going through this terrible thing that we fought to prevent. And we were ridiculed for it, and we were bashed for it, and we were silenced for it, and shadow banned for it, and, you know, all of that. And same with the vacations and everything else like that. Speaking truth it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, which is why, again, like on the last show, I always say this, I'm so proud of each and every one of you for standing in your convictions and standing on your morals, you know, and not letting your morals be flexible, not letting your morals change based on fear, based on all of that. And so bringing it full circle to the title of this video, is morality subjective and objective? Yeah, absolutely. Morality is subjective, but right and wrong is not. Right and wrong is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And it doesn't matter what geographical location you're in. It doesn't matter what time space you're in either. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And we did everything right. We did everything to try to preserve freedom and preserve liberty. And we may not have agreed with it, but we protected the other person's freedom because we're protecting our own in the process. So yeah, there's it's so much, but as above, so below. It's all a reflection of the spirituality. So we're resetting the matrix, and the matrix is being reset. They're trying to hijack it into the great reset, but I see them losing. I see them losing at every turn. They haven't been able to bring in any of their agenda. They've been so busy infighting with one another that they haven't been able to move anything forward. In 2 years, nothing has been accomplished. Nothing. I mean, hyperinflation, yeah, that hurts. But they had so many more plans. And then this whole Pfizer dump that we recently had. Brilliant. We can see now. Oh, you want to hear the latest bullshit? Okay. So I don't like to get into the vacations too much here on YouTube. But I mean, this is the data that was dumped. I was reading some of these studies on the vacation, right? So they came up with the term asymptomatic. You can still have the zombie virus, you're just asymptomatic. So you can be carrying it, but you just don't feel it, right? The Pfizer dump came out, and they figured out that they were doing, I want to say it was 50% placebos. And I started thinking to myself, if they're doing 50% placebos, or even anything close to that, well, they must be keeping a record on who got a placebo and who got the actual thing, right? I mean, this is a big experiment on the entire world. And now it's openly admitted with documents that this is an experiment on the entire world. And everybody was test subjects, just like we were saying in 2020. And we're like, we're not guinea pigs. We will not be guinea pigs. And as part Italian, a guinea pig, that's kind of a racist slur, but I don't take it as a racist slur. But anyways, so listen to this nonsense here that came from one of the studies. I'm going to try to use some codes, just to try to duck and dodge the AI, but listen to this nonsense. So Dr. Haas and his colleagues analyzed data from 12 clinical trials of the zombie virus vacation. The 12 trials included adverse effects reported from 22,578 placebo recipients. So 23,000, for just rounding up, people received placebos, and they reported adverse effects to the placebos. 22,800, let's call it 23, actually received the vacation. After the first injection, more than 35% of placebo recipients experienced systemic adverse events, symptoms affecting the entire body, such as fever with headache and fatigue, most commonly at 19.6% and 16.7% respectively. 16% of placebo recipients reported at least one local events, such as pain at the site of injection or redness or swelling. So what they're saying is that 35% of people who received placebos experienced some kind of adverse effect. Cherie brought up a good point here. What is the placebo? Is it 100% saline, or is it mixed with adjuvants and other kinds of things like that would actually cause some kind of effect? We don't know what the placebo is. We just know that it wasn't the vacation, the official vacation. But 35% of people supposedly reported adverse effects. And the main adverse effects is what they call local events, which is pain at the injection site, redness or swelling. I do B12 on a weekly basis, and I do testosterone on a weekly basis too. Sometimes I'll get a little swelling from that, or I'll get swelling from B12. So I can tell you firsthand that you inject anything into you, and you're going to get swelling at the injection site. It could be saline, so that's not uncommon for anything that's being injected. In comparison, after the first injection, 46% of vacation recipients experienced at least one systemic adverse effect, and 2/3 of them reported at least one local event. So a systemic event would be like a fever or something like that. A local event would be like something at the injection site. While this group received a pharmacologically active treatment, at least some of their adverse effects are attributed to the placebo effect, or in this case, the nocebo effect, as well given that many of these effects also occurred in the placebo group. So what they're saying is that the placebo group experienced adverse effects the same as the non-placebo group. So now they've created a new term called nocebo, which is an adverse effect from actually getting a genuine vacation that is the same as a placebo, which is basically an adverse effect created by the mind. Are you following me so far? Because this is some real mental gymnastics that's going on here. Haas and his colleagues' analysis suggested that nocebo accounted for 76% of all adverse events in the vacation group and nearly a quarter of all local effects reported. So now what they're saying is that the people who actually got the vacation, 76% of them are reporting adverse effects that are nocebo effects, i.e. created by the mind by receiving this treatment. You can't make this stuff up. Like, they're trying to say that the adverse effects they're there. They're recognizing them, 1,291. But they're all made up by the mind, like a placebo, like the opposite of a placebo, that's why they call it a nocebo. After the second dose, adverse events among the placebo group dipped to 32%, reporting any systemic event and 12% reporting any local effects. In contrast, participants who received the vacation reported more side effects. So at least they're being honest about that. The ones who actually got it reported more side effects, with 61% reporting systemic adverse effects, meaning like fevers, body chills, aches, heart attacks, strokes, stuff like that, and 73% reporting local adverse effects. So 61% of people reported some kind of systemic effect that affected the whole body, and 73% reported a local adverse effect. And that doesn't say if that is both of them, if participants had both of them. So what they're saying now is that the researchers calculated that the nocebo, again, made up by the mind, accounted for nearly 52% of the side effects reported after the second one. While the reason for this relative decline in nocebo effects cannot be confirmed, the researchers believe that the higher rate of adverse events in the vacated group in the first time may have led participants to anticipate more the second time. Non-specific symptoms like headaches and fatigues, which have shown to be particularly nocebo-sensitive, are listed among the most common adverse reactions following the vacation in many information leaflets. So in the leaflets that you get, it says may cause headache, may cause, what do they say here? Headache, fatigue, things like that. And they're saying these are called nocebo effects. So it's not actually the vacation that's giving you these side effects. It's a nocebo effect, and it's all in your head, okay? So you're actually experiencing side effects. You are, like, the side effects are real, but they're not coming from the vacation. They're coming from the nocebo effect. I'm just in awe at the mental gymnastics that go into this kind of research. And I guess this is a great wrap up to this entire show. Like, the mental gymnastics that go into religion, justifying the horrors of the Bible, looking at completely twisting around certain words like Lucifer and things like that, and just going by what you're told instead of what it actually says, doing mental gymnastics as to why it's okay to rape a 12-year-old girl and take her as a sex slave, as it says in the Bible. The mental gymnastics being, well, that was a different time, a different culture, so on and so forth. The mental gymnastics as to why blood sacrifices are okay, why drinking the blood of Jesus is okay, why being saved by the blood of Jesus is okay. On that show we did about Masonry, the Mason that was talking at the end of the show, who many people probably didn't get to see because it's 6.5 hours, and I don't blame anybody for not sitting through a 6.5 hour show. But he said, the main thing that I have a problem with Masonry is that in Masonry, the Mason is taught that by his good works and good deeds, he will find the Grand Lodge in heaven. And he's raised on his own accord as a Master Mason through the third degree ritual, when he goes through the third degree ritual and is born again, like Hiram Biff. And it doesn't say that he is raised through the blood of Jesus. And as the gospel tells us, it's only through the blood of Jesus that you can be reborn and that you will make it into heaven. So that's why I left Masonry for Christianity. And I was thinking, wow, that takes a lot of mental gymnastics. And they even went on, it was even more ridiculous. The guy on there, he went on and he said, so basically you were watching Christian television and one day you came across the gospel and heard the gospel for the first time. When earlier in the ritual, they were actually reading in the third degree. They read from the gospel. They read from the Bible. And so you're telling me that this Mason, it was a past master, and the York Rite, as I said before, you have to go and take an oath to uphold the teachings of Jesus Christ. So you go down the York Rite Masonry, which was the original Masonry. The Scottish Rite wasn't formed until like 50 years after Masonry was formed. So the Scottish Rite was a secondary thing, and the Scottish Rite's actually French. But you're telling me that that's the first time you heard the gospel, and you have been a Mason for many, many, many years, and the master of a lodge, and you taught Masonic stuff, etc., 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 and you didn't go down the York Rite and take an oath to defend the teachings of Jesus Christ? Is that what you're telling me? And you were watching Christian TV one day? Like, this is the kind of mental gymnastics that one has to go through in order to come to these conclusions. And they're using it in science too. The nocebo effect. Asymptomatic. This is why, I hope that you don't find the shows boring. I really don't. But I find them to be powerful. They are boring. I agree with you. 6.5 hours of reading these rituals was not very fun to do, because we didn't get to laugh, we didn't get to joke, we didn't get to do any of that. I mean, it's just like, it's textbook stuff. It's like reading textbook stuff. It wasn't fun. And it's not fun to sit there for 6.5 hours and listen to it. It's very informative, very educating, but it's not fun. But I think it's important to just divest ourselves of all of this nonsense, like all of it, when it comes to religion, when it comes to science, when it comes to everything, and just get back down to core, basic, critical thinking. Critical thinking. So, the number one thing I would leave people with, though, is a meme that I saw on Facebook that I thought was brilliant. Like, it was something to the effect of, when somebody challenges you on the facts that you're presenting, just reply to them. I've known you for 10 seconds, and I haven't enjoyed neither of those 10 seconds. It's not my job to educate you. Go educate yourself. I'm just telling you the facts. And I was like, that's brilliant. Why engage in all these arguments and back and forth online over and over and over again? It's good to wake people up. It's good to spread the truth. But don't sit there and bang on a door that's not going to open, because a lot of times there are bots out there. And they're bots both physically and metaphorically speaking too. But don't waste your time on that. And value your energy. And going right back to the Bible, let me just leave it with a quote from the Bible, because like I said, I get wisdom from everywhere. Don't cast your pearls before swine. And use critical thinking. And when you do, and apply it to not just politics, not just religion, but spirituality, you go beyond the veil, and life becomes much simpler, because you're not having to do all these mental gymnastics to come up with all these conclusions. Kiss the one you love right now. You never know last time is going to be. And thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. Cherie's got something to do early, and tonight I was just like, what am I going to do, man? I know, I'll hang out with my tribe. Kiss the one you love right now. You never know the last time it's going to be, and we'll see you even further beyond the veil. Love ya.